All right, let's dive into something that's probably happened to every piano player out there. You know that feeling, right? You finally nail a piece you've been working on, but then the next day it sounds, well, off. Every note is just a little, or maybe a lot, out of tune. Makes you wonder if your piano has a mind of its own, doesn't it?
It really does seem that way, doesn't it?
Like it's constantly changing. So what's the real deal here? Why do pianos seem to have a life of their own when it comes to staying in tune?
Well, the truth is there are a lot of factors at play, but the biggest culprits might surprise you. Temperature and humidity. They can really mess with a piano's delicate sound.
We often get so caught up in the mechanics of tuning that we forget about the invisible forces all around us.
You're saying the air itself can throw a piano out of whack? Absolutely. And as you might guess, extreme temperatures can really wreak havoc. Imagine a sweltering summer day. Let's say a scorching 92 degrees. Now picture your poor piano trapped in that heat.
I'm already sweating just thinking about it.
It's rough. That's actually what happened to a piano owner who called her tuner in a panic. Her piano was so out of tune just weeks after its last tuning, and she was at her wit's end.
Oh man, I bet that tuner had a field day with that one. So what's the science behind this? What's actually happening inside the piano when it gets that hot?
Well, heat makes the steel strings in a piano expand. And we're not just talking about a minuscule amount either.
How much are we talking?
A 40-inch piano string, just from the heat, can expand by a fraction of an inch with a significant temperature increase.
I still wouldn't think that would be enough to throw it out of tune.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because that tiny change makes the string tighten, making its pitch rise. And when you multiply that across all the strings in a piano, well, it throws the whole instrument out of whack. And the hotter it gets, the worse it becomes. Above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the rate of detuning really accelerates.
Yikes. So if any of our listeners are thinking of turning their living rooms into saunas, maybe reconsider, at least for the sake of your piano.
It's true. But it's not just the heat that's a problem. Extreme cold can also do a number on the piano, though it's not as common.
Really? I would have thought cold would make it go flat, not sharp.
It does. It makes the strings contract. There's actually a pretty crazy story about a Steinway grand piano that was submerged in icy water after a pipe burst.
Oh no, what happened?
The poor thing was a whole semitone flat. That's like every note was playing a half step lower than it should have been, needed major repairs to get back in shape.
So hot or cold, extreme temperatures spell trouble for a piano.
Exactly. Think of your piano like a finely tuned athlete. It needs the right conditions to perform at its best. And wild temperature swings, whether it's a heat wave or a deep freeze, will definitely throw it off its game.
So we've covered the heat, but what about the other culprit you mentioned? What about humidity? How does that play into keeping a piano in tune?
Humidity, huh? I never would have thought that could affect a piano that much.
It really can, and it all comes down to the wood.
The wood. Yeah, the wooden parts of your piano, especially the soundboard. You see, wood expands and contracts with changes in humidity, just like, anything made of wood. Think about it. What happens if you leave a wooden chair out in the dry winter air for too long?
It cracks. Actually, yeah, I've had that happen to me before, unfortunately.
Exactly. And it's the same idea with the piano soundboard. That's that big wooden panel inside that vibrates and amplifies the sound, right? When the air gets too dry, let's say, below 35% humidity, the wood starts to shrink. And that spells trouble for your piano's tuning.
So if the soundboard shrinks, does that make the strings looser?
That's exactly it. As that soundboard shrinks, it reduces the tension on the strings. And when the tension drops, well, their pitch drops too. The guide mentions this case where a piano was placed right next to a heating vent in the middle of winter. Not a good situation.
I bet. Talk about adding insult to injury. Dry winter air is bad enough already.
Tell me about it. The humidity in that case plummeted, get this, to a shocking 18%. And you know what? The soundboard actually shrunk so much that the strings were practically rattling against the frame.
Ouch, that had to sound awful. I can't imagine trying to play on a piano in that condition.
Yeah.
So that's low humidity, but what about the opposite? What happens when the humidity gets too high?
Well, then you have, you guessed it, the opposite problem. High humidity, we're talking above 70%, causes the wood to soak up that excess moisture and swell up. And all that swelling puts way too much pressure on the strings.
Ah, so instead of going flat, the piano would sound abnormally sharp.
You got it. High humidity pushes those strings higher, throws the whole thing out of whack. There's actually a pretty wild story about this in the guide.
Okay, now you have to tell me this one.
So there was this piano teacher who called a tuner because her grand piano sounded incredibly sharp. Like every single note was a quarter step higher than it should have been. And guess what the culprit was?
Let me guess. High humidity.
You nailed it. It turned out the soundboard had swollen so much that the bridge, that piece that transmits the vibrations from the strings to the soundboard, it was actually warping. Some of the strings were even close to snapping.
Wow. Talk about a humidity nightmare. So basically, it sounds like humidity, when it comes to pianos, is a Goldilocks situation. Can't be too high, can't be too low, it has to be just right. So what's the sweet spot? What should people be aiming for?
Ideally, you want to keep the humidity around your piano between 45% and 55%.
Okay, 45% to 55%. Got it. And how do you even measure something like that?
The best way is to use a hygrometer. It's a simple little device that measures the humidity level in the air.
A hygrometer. Okay, I'm adding that to my shopping list. So besides keeping an eye on those humidity levels, what are some other things people can do to keep their pianos happy and, most importantly, in tune? All right, so we know humidity is important, but are there any other everyday things that can affect a piano's tuning? Things that people might not even think about?
Oh, absolutely. The guide mentions drafts, for one. They can cause more trouble than you might think.
Drafts? Really? I don't think I've ever thought about drafts messing with a piano.
Yeah, it's all about those sudden temperature changes. Like, picture a blast of cold air from a window or a doorway hitting your piano. Creates a mini climate around it, and that makes the temperature and humidity fluctuate like crazy. Not good for those sensitive strings.
So all those old wives' tales about keeping pianos away from windows and doors, maybe they were onto something.
Right. There's a reason those sayings get passed down. And it's not just drafts. You got to watch out for heat sources, too. Things like radiators, vents, even fireplaces.
Yeah, those can really pump out the heat.
Exactly. Too much heat can dry out that soundboard super fast. And we already talked about what happens then.
Right. Shrinking soundboard, loose strings, bad news all around. So basically, if you can feel a temperature change near your piano, it's probably not doing it any favors.
You got it.
Oh.
And believe it or not, even direct sunlight can be an issue.
Wait, really? From a window?
You bet. That intense sunlight streaming through a window can really heat up a piano, just like it heats a room. And we know heat is not our friend here.
So it's like putting sunglasses on your piano. Protect it from those UV rays.
Exactly. And the simplest solution is usually the best. Just close the curtains or blinds during those sunny parts of the day. Easy peasy.
Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. Are there any other easy fixes like that, especially for folks dealing with really dry or humid environments?
Absolutely. If you're battling dry air, a humidifier can be a lifesaver for your piano. Think of it like giving your instrument a little spa day.
I like it. Pamper that piano.
And on the flip side, if you're dealing with high humidity, a dehumidifier is going to be your best friend. Helps keep that moisture under control and prevents that dreaded soundboard swelling.
So it's all about creating a nice, stable environment for your piano. Makes sense. And it sounds like these tips aren't just good for keeping it in tune, but they're good for the piano itself in the long run.
100%. Think of it like this. Taking care of your piano's environment is an investment. It's going to help preserve your instrument and keep it sounding its best for years to come. And speaking of keeping your piano sounding its best, the guide also mentions some more advanced techniques that piano technicians can use to really enhance tuning stability. Things like double tuning and extra lever placements. Ever heard of those?
Double tuning? Yeah, I think I've heard of that, but I'll be honest, I don't really know what it entails.
Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. The technician tunes the piano once and then goes back and fine-tunes everything again.
So it's like a double check to make sure everything is absolutely perfect.
Exactly. It's all about precision.
Yeah.
And then there were those extra lever placements I mentioned. That's where the technician actually adds little levers along the strings. They act like fine-tuning adjusters, allowing for even more precise tuning.
Wow, that's incredible. It sounds like piano technicians have to have a deep understanding of both the art and science of sound.
They really do. And these techniques, while they might be more time-consuming, can make a huge difference, especially for pianos that are played a lot. Extends the life of the tuning significantly.
So it's like anything else, right? A little extra care and attention goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of piano tuning, what are some key things you hope our listeners will take away from all of this?
Well, first and foremost, remember that temperature and humidity are major players when it comes to keeping your piano in tune. Aim for that sweet spot of 45% to 55% humidity. And whatever you do, avoid those extreme temperatures.
Got it. What else?
Be mindful of your piano's surroundings, those sneaky drafts, those heat sources lurking about, even those sunny windows. They can all wreak havoc on your piano's tuning.
Duly noted.
And finally, don't underestimate those simple solutions. Closing those curtains, using a humidifier or dehumidifier when needed, those little things can make a world of difference in keeping your piano happy and sounding its best.
All fantastic advice. And as we say goodbye to the world of piano tuning, it really makes you wonder what other instruments out there might be just as sensitive to their environment, but we never even think about it. Something to ponder, right?
It really is. There's a whole world of fascinating connections out there just waiting to be explored.
That's what we love about a good deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the inner workings of pianos and the often overlooked impact of temperature and humidity. We hope you've learned a thing or two and maybe even feel inspired to show your own instruments a little extra TLC.